force flows through all living things, binding the galaxy together in an endless current of light and shadow. But in the deepest trenches of the ocean worlds, where pressure crushes durasteel and darkness swallows even the brightest stars, there exists another kind of power, ancient, primal, and utterly unbound by the teachings of the Jedi Order. During the High Republic era, when the Republic stretched its golden tendrils toward the frontier and the Jedi stood as beacons of peace, that power arrived in a flash of emerald light and churning water, carried by a king who knew nothing of the Force, but everything about command. Arthur Curry had been pursuing a rogue Atlantean war machine through an experimental dimensional portal when the fabric of reality twisted around him. One moment, he swam through Earth's Pacific depths, trident blazing with ancient magic. The next, he plunged through a corridor of screaming hyperspace energy, his lungs burning as alien physics tore at his body. The portal collapsed behind him with a thunderclap that sent shockwaves through an entire star system, and Aquaman crashed into the tropical seas of Mon Cala like a meteor wrapped in living water. The impact created a tsunami visible from orbit. Republic envoys negotiating trade agreements in the floating city of Coral City barely had time to activate emergency shields before a wall of water 300 meters high swept across the coastline. Jedi Master Stellan Gios threw up his hands, channeling the Force to divert the worst of the surge around civilian populations, while his Padawan, Bel Zettifar, stared in confusion at the epicenter of the disturbance. The Force swirled chaotically there, but not in any pattern the young Jedi recognized. It felt alive, angry, confused. Beneath the waves, Arthur Curry oriented himself with practiced ease. His Atlantean physiology adapted instantly to the alien water. Slightly different mineral composition, strange bioluminescent microorganisms, but fundamentally the same life-giving ocean he'd known since birth. He was 2 kilometers deep and descending, the pressure sufficient to flatten any surface dweller into paste. But to him, it felt like home. His enhanced senses cataloged his surroundings, massive coral formations engineered with impossible precision, schools of fish that moved with coordinated intelligence, and everywhere the voices, thousands of them, millions, an entire ocean ecosystem crying out in telepathic chorus, their primitive minds touching his with curiosity, fear, and something approaching reverence. Aquaman had commanded Earth's seas for years, but he'd never felt anything like this. The sheer diversity staggered him. Creatures with 6 eyes and crystalline scales, serpentine leviathans the size of starships, coral polyps that hummed with collective consciousness. They all sensed him. They all reached for his mind. Where am I? The question went unanswered. Arthur gripped his trident tighter, its golden surface unmarred despite the dimensional journey, and kicked toward what his senses identified as civilization. The water here thrummed with technology, sonic generators, hydrostatic pressure regulators, things his Atlantean mind couldn't quite classify. He passed through a forest of kelp that stretched toward the surface like emerald towers, each strand housing hundreds of symbiotic creatures that scattered at his approach. Then he saw them, the Mon Calamari. A patrol of 5 swam in formation, their salmon-colored skin rippling with bioluminescent patterns Arthur recognized as communication. They wore armor that seemed grown rather than forged, carried weapons that fired compressed water and sonic pulses and stopped dead when they spotted him. Their large, bulbous eyes widened in synchronized shock. Arthur raised one hand slowly, keeping the trident pointed downward. He'd done this before. First contact with civilizations that didn't know Atlantis existed. Stay calm. Project Authority. Show strength, but not aggression. The lead Mon Calamari, a female with ceremonial fins adorning her armor, spoke in a language of clicks, whistles, and subsonic pulses. Arthur didn't understand the words, but his telepathy caught the emotional context. Alarm, confusion, a rapid-fire transmission to some higher authority. He focused, pushing his consciousness toward hers with the same gentle pressure he'd use on a spooked dolphin. Peace. I mean no harm. The Mon Calamari jerked backward as if struck. Her companions raised their weapons, aquatic rifles humming with building charge. But the leader held up a webbed hand, her massive eyes fixed on Arthur with sudden, intense focus. She spoke again, more slowly, and this time Arthur felt her mind touching his, not with the force which he could sense swirling around these beings like invisible currents, but with something deeper. Recognition. She was telepathic too, in her own way. Images flashed between them. Arthur saw vast cities of living coral and metal, saw the Mon Calamari's long history of conflict with their Quarren cousins, saw the recent arrival of the Republic and their strange warrior monks who claimed to serve the Force. The Mon Calamari woman, Captain Risha, his mind supplied, saw fragments of Atlantis, of Earth's oceans, of a golden-haired king who commanded the tides themselves. What are you? Her thought was clear now, transmitted through their shared medium of water and telepathy. A king without a kingdom, Arthur replied, and someone very far from home. Before Risha could respond, the water around them suddenly pressed inward with invisible force. Arthur's combat instincts flared. He spun, trident raised, and found himself facing two robed figures descending through the water with impossible grace. They didn't swim so much as will themselves downward, the ocean parting around them as if by command. Jedi. Master Stellan Gios was a veteran of 100 diplomatic missions and twice as many conflicts. He'd negotiated with Hutt crime lords, mediated disputes between clone species, and once talked a Nihil marauder out of detonating a thermal bomb. But he had never encountered anything quite like the being who now faced him in Mon Cala's depths. Golden trident blazing with energy that made his lightsaber feel almost quaint. "I am Jedi Master Stellan Gios," he said, his voice amplified by a breathing apparatus that translated his basic into sonic pulses. "You've caused quite the disturbance, friend. The Republic has questions." Arthur studied the two Jedi. The older one radiated calm authority, his hand resting near but not on his weapon. The younger, barely more than a boy, practically vibrated with nervous energy and poorly shielded curiosity. Both glowed in Arthur's enhanced perception, surrounded by that strange energy he'd been sensing since his arrival, the Force. He'd heard legends of similar powers in Earth's most ancient texts, but seeing it active, living, wielding itself through conscious beings, that was something else entirely. "I didn't mean to disturb anything," Arthur said, his voice carrying clearly through the water without need for technology. "One minute I was home, the next I'm here. Where is here exactly?" "Mon Cala," Bel Zettifar said, before his master could answer. "In the Calamari sector, part of the Galactic Republic." He hesitated. You're not from anywhere in the Republic, are you? Your connection to the living ocean? It's like the Force, but it's not. I've never felt anything like it. The Force? Arthur's grip on the trident relaxed slightly. Not enemies, then. Not yet. I've heard you mention that twice now. I don't know anything about your Force, but where I come from, I'm the King of Atlantis. I can communicate with all ocean life, command it when necessary. Master Stellan's eyebrows rose. All ocean life? To demonstrate, Arthur simply thought outward. His consciousness expanded like a ripple from a stone, touching every living creature within 5 kilometers. Fish, eels, crustaceans, the massive colto-producing whales in the deeper trenches, even the microscopic plankton, they all responded. The ocean itself seemed to shift as millions of creatures oriented toward their new master. Schools of fish swam in perfect synchronization, forming patterns in the water. A pod of Mon Calamari riding beasts broke from their handlers and circled Arthur like an honor guard. Even the coral around them pulsed with new light. Bell stumbled backward, his connection to the Force screaming with the sudden press of so many living minds moving as one. "Master, I see it, Padawan." Stellan kept his voice level, but Arthur could see the tension in his shoulders. This was a being who could command ecosystems. In a galaxy where water worlds represented a significant percentage of inhabited systems, that made him either the most valuable ally or the most dangerous enemy the Republic had ever encountered. Captain Raisha and her patrol had backed away, weapons lowered now in something approaching awe. The Mon Calamari had legends of ancient ocean spirits, beings who spoke for the seas themselves. They'd always dismissed them as mythology, until now. Arthur released his hold on the creatures, letting them return to their natural patterns. The ocean settled, but the memory of that command lingered in every living mind within range. "I'm not here to conquer or rule you," he said, addressing all of them. "But I am here, and until I find a way home, I need to understand this place, this Republic, these ocean worlds you mentioned." Master Stellan made a decision. He'd been trained to trust the Force, and right now the Force was practically singing with possibility around this newcomer. Not darkness, the being radiated a protector's spirit, a guardian's purpose, but power on a scale that could shift the balance of entire sectors. "Then perhaps we can help each other," Stellan said. "Come to the surface. Meet with the Republic delegation and Mon Cala's leaders. Share your story. In exchange, we'll share ours. The High Republic is an age of exploration and cooperation. We don't turn away those in need. Even those who command your oceans, especially them." Stellan gestured upward. "Though I suspect you'll find the galaxy's water worlds are more complicated than simple command. The Mon Calamari and Quarren have been locked in political struggle for generations. The Republic tries to mediate, but sovereignty is delicate." Arthur followed the gesture, his eyes tracking toward the distant surface where he could sense massive cities floating on the waves. Political struggle, sovereignty, delicate balances. It all sounded depressingly familiar. Atlantis had fought those battles for millennia. Surface world versus ocean kingdom. Unity versus independence, protection versus domination. "Lead the way, Master Jedi," Arthur said. "But I'm telling you now, I bow to no one. Not your Republic, not your order, not anyone. I'm a king, and kings don't kneel." Bell glanced at his master, uncertain how to respond to such direct defiance of Republic authority. But Stellan simply smiled. The High Republic respects sovereignty, King of Atlantis. We ask only that sovereigns respect the peace. As they ascended through Mon Cala's crystalline waters, Arthur Curry wondered what he'd truly fallen into. This galaxy was vast beyond his comprehension. He could sense it in the way people spoke of sectors and systems as casually as he'd speak of bays and reefs. Somewhere out there were countless other ocean worlds, each with their own ecosystems, their own struggles, their own need for someone who understood the deep places. Above them, Coral City glittered in the light of Mon Cala's twin suns, its towers grown from living coral and reinforced with Republic technology. Thousands of Mon Calamari and Quarren moved through the streets and canals, blissfully unaware that a king from another dimension had just claimed dominion over their seas. In the Senate building, Republic envoys prepared to meet this unexpected visitor, already calculating how to integrate him into their expanding frontier. And deeper still, in the trenches where even Mon Calamari rarely ventured, ancient things stirred. Creatures that had slept for millennia, undisturbed by civilization's growth. They'd felt the new presence in their ocean, felt his call ripple through every living thing. Some retreated further into darkness. Others began to rise, curious about this king who spoke their language. Arthur surfaced into the warm air of Mon Cala, water streaming from his shoulders as he stood on a Republic landing platform. Bell and Stellan emerged beside him, and he noticed immediately how the Jedi needed their technology to breathe underwater while he required nothing. Another advantage. Another difference that would make him both valuable and dangerous to these people. A delegation awaited them. Mon Calamari officials in ceremonial robes, Quarren representatives with tentacled faces that reminded Arthur of certain deep-sea species on Earth, and Republic diplomats whose species he couldn't even begin to identify. They all stared at him with varying degrees of curiosity, suspicion, and fear. Good. Let them wonder, let them question. Arthur Curry had built Atlantis into a superpower through strength, wisdom, and the absolute certainty that the ocean's voice mattered as much as any surface nation's. This galaxy would learn the same lesson. Honored guests, said a Mon Calamari whom Arthur's telepathic connection to Captain Risha identified as Senator Mina Tills. Welcome to Mon Cala. I understand you've had quite the dramatic arrival, King. Forgive me, I don't believe I caught your name. Arthur Curry, he said, planting the trident of Poseidon on the platform with a wet thud that echoed like thunder. King of Atlantis, protector of the seas, and apparently very lost. Your Jedi tell me this is the Galactic Republic. I'm going to need you to explain exactly what that means. And more importantly, how many ocean worlds you have. Senator Tills exchanged glances with her Quarren counterpart, a grizzled warrior named Nosor Ree. Ocean worlds? There are hundreds in Republic space alone, thousands more in unexplored regions. Why do you ask? Arthur smiled, and it was the expression of a man who just realized the true scope of his new domain. Because, Senator, where I come from, I'm responsible for every creature that swims, every reef that grows, every current that flows. If I'm stuck in this galaxy until I find my way home, I'm not going to sit idle while ocean worlds suffer or struggle. You wanted to know what I am? I'm the voice of the deep, and the deep has a lot to say. The silence that followed was broken only by the lapping of waves against the platform and the distant cry of Mon Calamari seabirds. Master Stellan felt the force shift around them, possibilities branching in 1,000 directions. This wasn't just a visitor from another dimension. This was a catalyst. The ocean worlds of the Republic had always been fragmented, divided by species rivalry and geographical isolation. But if this being truly could unite them, speak for them, protect them, the High Republic's golden age was about to get considerably more complicated. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Wars galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. May the Force be with you. The Republic's response to Arthur Curry's declaration came swiftly, and with all the bureaucratic complexity he'd come to expect from surface world governments. Within hours of his arrival, Mon Cala's senatorial chambers filled with delegates, Jedi observers, and holographic projections of Republic officials from across the sector. They wanted answers, they wanted assurances. Most of all, they wanted to understand exactly what kind of power had just announced itself as the voice of the galaxy's oceans. Arthur sat in a chamber designed for Mon Calamari physiology, half flooded with both aerial and aquatic seating, and listened to 3 hours of political posturing with growing impatience. Senator Mina Tills advocated for immediate Republic integration, arguing that someone with Arthur's abilities could resolve the long-standing Mon Calamari Quarren tensions. Nosor Ree, the Quarren representative, countered that no outsider should be granted authority over sovereign species, regardless of their powers. A Rhodian trade commissioner wanted to discuss exclusive contracts for Arthur's services in protecting commercial shipping lanes through dangerous waters. Through it all, Master Stellan Gios observed quietly from the gallery, his Padawan Bell beside him. The Jedi had their own concerns. Arthur's connection to marine life operated on principles that seemed parallel to the Force, but fundamentally different. He didn't channel the cosmic energy that bound all things. He commanded through something older, more primal, a bond forged not by meditation and training, but by birthright and evolutionary adaptation. With respect, Arthur finally interrupted, his voice cutting through a particularly tedious debate about jurisdictional boundaries. You're all missing the point. I'm not asking for your permission to protect ocean life. I'm telling you that's what I do. It's what I am. The question isn't whether I'll do it. The question is whether you'll work with me or get in my way. The chamber erupted in overlapping voices, protests, accusations of arrogance, demands for Republic protocol. Arthur weathered it all with the patience of someone who'd faced similar resistance 1,000 times. Atlantis hadn't been accepted by the surface nations easily either. It had taken years of proving that the ocean kingdoms deserved a seat at the table, that their voice mattered as much as any land-based power. Senator Tills raised her webbed hands for silence. King Curry, please understand, the Republic operates on principles of democratic representation and mutual cooperation. We cannot simply grant one individual unchecked authority over entire ecosystems, no matter how noble their intentions. I'm not asking you to grant me anything, Arthur replied, leaning forward. The trident of Poseidon rested against his chair, and even inactive, it seemed to pulse with barely contained energy. I already have the authority. Every creature in Mon Cala's oceans recognizes me. I can feel them right now, swimming in patterns that haven't been seen in a million years because they finally have someone who speaks their language. Your laws, your protocols, their surface concerns. The ocean doesn't care about Senate votes. Nosor Ree slapped a tentacle against his desk. This is exactly what we feared. Another would-be tyrant claiming divine right to rule. "I'm not a tyrant," Arthur said, his voice dropping to something dangerous. "But I am a king. There's a difference. A tyrant takes power for himself. A king uses power to protect those who can't protect themselves. Every fish, every whale, every microorganism in your oceans, they're not resources to be exploited. Their lives under my protection now." Master Stellan finally spoke, his calm voice cutting through the tension. "Perhaps we're approaching this incorrectly. King Curry, you say you wish to protect the ocean worlds. The Republic shares that goal. Why not demonstrate your intentions? Mon Cala faces challenges you might help resolve without requiring formal authority." Arthur turned to the Jedi, recognizing an olive branch when he saw one. "What kind of challenges?" "The Quarren separatist movement has been sabotaging coral reef farms in the southern hemisphere," Tills explained, shooting a pointed look at Nosor Ree. "Not officially sanctioned, of course, but extremists on both sides have been escalating tensions for months. The damaged reefs are dying, and with them, countless ecosystems. Republic peacekeepers have struggled to identify the saboteurs without inflaming political tensions further." "And you think I can help with that?" Arthur asked. "You can communicate with the ocean itself," Bell interjected, earning a subtle nod from his master. "If someone's been sabotaging the reefs, the creatures living there would know. They'd remember." Arthur considered this. It was exactly the kind of problem he'd solved dozens of times in Earth's oceans. Environmental damage caused by political conflict, with marine life caught in the crossfire. And it would give him a chance to explore Mon Cala properly, to understand the scope of what he was dealing with. "I'll look into it," he said, "but I'm doing this my way. No Republic oversight, no Jedi supervision. You want me to prove I'm not a tyrant? Then trust me to do what I do best." The debate that followed lasted another hour, but eventually a compromise emerged. Arthur would investigate the reef sabotage independently, while Republic officials observed from a respectful distance. In exchange, he'd provide regular updates and refrain from any actions that might destabilize the existing political structure. It was a fragile agreement that satisfied no one completely, which, Arthur had learned, was usually the mark of effective diplomacy. As the session concluded and delegates filed out, Master Stellan approached Arthur directly. "A word, if you're willing, King Curry." Arthur gestured for him to continue, curious about what the Jedi wanted to say without an audience. "I've been a Jedi for 40 years, Stellan said quietly. "I've seen many beings with extraordinary abilities, force-sensitive species who can manipulate reality itself, creatures who exist across multiple dimensions simultaneously, ancient intelligences that predate our recorded history. But I've never encountered someone whose power operates so completely outside the Force's influence. You're wondering if that makes me dangerous? I'm wondering if it makes you vulnerable." Stellan's expression was genuinely concerned. "The Force guides us, protects us, warns us of danger. Without that connection, you're navigating this galaxy blind to threats that even we struggle to perceive. The Nihil, for instance. Marauders who've been raiding frontier worlds with increasing boldness. They've already hit 2 ocean worlds this month. Castellan lost an entire kelp farming community. Arthur's jaw tightened. Tell me about these nihil. Over the next hour, as Mon Cala's twin suns set and the floating city ignited with bioluminescent lighting, Stellan explained the emerging threat. The nihil were raiders who struck from hyperspace with no warning, using experimental technology to appear and disappear before Republic forces could respond. They targeted remote settlements, stole resources, and left destruction in their wake. The Jedi Order had been trying to track them for months, but the Nihil's leader, a figure known only as the Eye, seemed to anticipate their every move. They haven't hit Mon Cala yet, Stellan continued, pulling up a holographic map that showed recent Nihil attacks across the sector. The planet's too well defended, too politically significant, but smaller ocean worlds. They're vulnerable, and if word spreads about a being who can command entire oceans, they'll either try to recruit me or kill me, Arthur finished. I've dealt with pirates before, Master Jedi. They respect strength and fear, nothing else. If these Nihil want to fight, they'll get one. That's precisely what concerns me. The Jedi Code teaches us to avoid violence when possible, to seek peaceful solutions. Arthur stood, collecting his trident. Your code sounds noble, but I've learned that sometimes the only language bullies understand is force. Not your mystical energy, actual physical consequences. You protect with philosophy and meditation. I protect with action. Before Stellan could respond, an alarm echoed across Coral City. Both men turned toward the sound as emergency lights began flashing throughout the chamber. Bell burst back into the room, his young face pale with urgency. Master, we're receiving distress signals from Castellan. Multiple signals. The Nihil are attacking again, and this time they brought a fleet. Arthur's enhanced hearing picked up the rapid-fire transmissions, crackling through the Republic communication network. Screams, explosions, the wet, terrible sounds of structures collapsing into ocean waters, and beneath it all, something that made his Atlantean blood run cold, the psychic death cries of thousands of marine creatures dying en masse. How far is Castellan from here? He demanded. 3 hours by Republic cruiser, Stellan said, already moving toward the exit. The Jedi will... 3 hours is too long. Arthur was already running towards the platform's edge, his body shifting into combat readiness. I need a ship, something fast. Even our fastest vessels can't... Bell started to say. Arthur didn't wait for the rest. He dove off the platform, his body cutting through the air like a spear before plunging into Mon Cala's warm ocean. He sank 50 meters in seconds, then stopped, spreading his consciousness outward with desperate urgency. The ocean answered immediately, not with words, but with understanding. Within minutes, a massive shape emerged from the depths. The Mon Calamari called them star whales, kilometer-long cetaceans capable of swimming through both water and the vacuum of space. Their biology adapted to survive in either environment through evolutionary quirks that scientists still didn't fully understand. They migrated between ocean worlds, following currents of cosmic radiation that ordinary beings couldn't perceive. One surfaced now beneath Arthur, responding to his call with ancient recognition. Arthur gripped the creature's dorsal ridge as it breached the surface beside the platform where Stellan and Bell stood gaping. "You said the Nihil respect nothing but strength," Arthur called out. "Let's see how they feel about a king who rides the stars themselves." The star whale's biological engines ignited, organic fusion chambers that converted water into thrust through processes that bordered on the miraculous. It shot upward, carrying Arthur on its back as it transitioned from ocean to atmosphere to the cold black of space in under 3 minutes. Behind them, Mon Cala shrank to a blue marble, then a distant point of light. Arthur had never experienced anything like this. The whale's body protected him from the vacuum through a field of pressurized water and bioelectric energy, creating a pocket of breathable environment along its spine. Stars wheeled overhead in impossible clarity, and through his connection to the creature, he could feel it navigating, not by sight or instruments, but by sensing the gravitational currents and hyperspace lanes that crisscrossed the galaxy like invisible rivers. The journey to Castellan took 90 minutes instead of 3 hours. Arthur spent that time trying not to think about the fact that he was riding a living spaceship through an alien galaxy, focusing instead on what he'd do when he arrived. The Nihil were raiders. Raiders followed patterns, hit hard, take what you can carry, disappear before reinforcements arrive. If he could disrupt their extraction, trap them in Castellan's waters. The star whale dropped out of its faster-than-light swimming as Castellan appeared ahead, a planet dominated by vast oceans dotted with volcanic islands. Even from orbit, Arthur could see the damage. 3 massive Nihil vessels hung in low atmosphere, smaller craft swarming between them and the planet's surface. Explosions bloomed across one of the major settlements, and his enhanced vision caught bodies both humanoid and aquatic, floating in burning water. Rage, cold and absolute, filled Arthur Curry's chest. This was what he'd feared when Stellan described the frontier's vulnerability. Ocean worlds couldn't defend themselves against threats from space. Their civilizations were adapted for water, not void combat. They needed someone who understood both realms. They needed a king. Arthur directed the star whale into a steep dive, angling toward the largest Nihil vessel. As they approached, defensive cannons swiveled to track them, but the gunners hesitated. What they were seeing didn't match any known attack profile. A biological entity carrying a single humanoid rider. It looked more like a navigation error than a threat. That hesitation cost them everything. Arthur stood on the whale's back as they closed to within 100 meters of the Nihil ship. He raised the trident of Poseidon high, and for the first time since arriving in this galaxy, he called upon its full power. The ancient weapon responded with golden light that turned space itself into a cathedral of radiance. Energy crackled along its 3 prongs, not the Force, not hyperspace radiation, but something older and wilder, magic that predated human civilization, forged in the first oceans of Earth by beings who'd shaped reality through will and wonder. He hurled a bolt of pure oceanic fury at the Nihil vessel. The energy struck the ship's hull and didn't explode. It flooded. Seawater materialized from nothing, pouring through breached hull plating like a dam had burst inside the vacuum. The Nihil crew had seconds to scream before their ship became an aquarium, every corridor and chamber filling with tons of pressurized ocean. Systems shorted, engines died. The vessel began to fall. Arthur caught it with his telekinesis before it could crash into Castellan's settlements. He'd moved entire tidal waves on Earth. Controlling one falling starship was manageable, if barely. he guided it down into the planet's deepest trench, ensuring the Nihil aboard would survive but remain trapped until Republic authorities could arrive. The other two Nihil ships immediately opened fire. Energy blasts seared through space, forcing Arthur and the Star Whale into evasive maneuvers. But Arthur was fighting on instinct now, his tactical mind adapting Earth-based naval combat to three-dimensional space warfare. He sent the Whale diving toward Castellan's atmosphere while simultaneously reaching out with his consciousness to every marine creature on the planet. Thousands of species responded, millions of individual animals, all crying out for help, all seeking the protection they could feel radiating from this newcomer. Arthur gave them purpose, he gave them coordination, he gave them vengeance. As the Nihil fighters pursued him into the atmosphere, they encountered something no raider had ever faced before. The ocean itself rose up to meet them. Waterspouts formed with unnatural precision, reaching hundreds of meters into the air. Schools of flying fish, genetically adapted to Castellan's volcanic updrafts, swarmed the fighter cockpits, obscuring vision. And deeper in the ocean, things with teeth and tentacles and biological weapons began converging on the locations where Nihil troops were still pillaging the settlements. Arthur directed the Star Whale to beach itself on one of the volcanic islands where Nihil ground forces had been corralling prisoners. He leaped from its back, trident blazing, and charged into the raiders with the full fury of a king protecting his people. The Nihil wore makeshift armor and carried weapons that fired unstable energy bolts. They fought with the desperation of those who knew retreat wasn't coming. But Arthur had been trained by Atlantean weapons masters, had fought wars in Earth's deepest trenches against enemies both human and inhuman. These raiders were dangerous, but they weren't prepared for someone who could anticipate their movements by reading the emotional broadcasts of every living thing around them. He drove the trident through a raider's weapon, the ancient metal shearing through modern alloys like tissue paper. A backhand strike sent another flying into the volcanic rock hard enough to crack the stone. The third tried to call for backup, but Arthur summoned a wave that swept the entire group off the island and into the waiting ocean, where creatures he'd summoned were very eager to have a conversation about violating their territory. The prisoners, a mix of Castellan natives and Republic colonists, stared at Arthur with expressions he recognized: fear, awe, hope, the same looks he'd gotten when Atlantis first revealed itself to the surface world. "Republic forces are coming," he told them, his voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through his veins. "The Jedi will be here soon. You're safe now." A young Nautolan female, her head tendrils singed by blaster fire, stepped forward. Who are you?" Arthur smiled grimly, looking up as the remaining Nihil ships began their retreat, recognizing they'd lost this battle the moment the ocean turned against them. "I'm someone who's very tired of bullies, and I'm going to make sure they learn that lesson permanently." He spent the next 2 hours coordinating with arriving Republic forces. Stellan's cruiser arrived first, followed by Mon Calamari defense ships and Jedi reinforcements. The battle was over, but the work of rescue and recovery had only begun. Arthur dove repeatedly into the damaged settlements, using his strength to lift debris and his telepathy to locate survivors trapped in flooded structures. Master Stellan found him as the twin suns of Castellan set, washing the volcanic landscape in crimson light. Arthur sat on a beach, the trident resting across his knees, surrounded by local marine life that had beached themselves just to be near him. Stellan recognized the pose, exhaustion held at bay by sheer willpower. "The Republic is already calling you a hero," the Jedi said quietly. "You saved hundreds of lives today, maybe thousands." "I was too late to save the ones who died," Arthur replied, his voice hollow. "I heard them, Master Jedi. Every fish, every coral polyp, every creature that burned or suffocated when the Nihil attacked. They died screaming into the void, and I was 3 hours away arguing politics." Stellan sat down beside him, uninvited but not unwelcome. "You can't be everywhere at once." "No, but I can be more places than I am now." Arthur stood, energy returning as purpose crystallized in his mind. "You said there are thousands of ocean worlds in this galaxy. How many have Republic protection, real protection, not just a couple of Jedi passing through every few months?" "Not enough," Stellan admitted. "The frontier is vast, and the Republic spreads thinner every year." "Then that's going to change." Arthur planted the trident in the sand with finality. "I'm going to visit every major ocean world in this sector. I'm going to establish contact with their marine ecosystems, coordinate their defenses, and make it very clear that anyone who attacks them will answer to me. The Republic can help or stay out of my way, but this is happening." "You're talking about building an independent power base," Stellan said carefully. "The Senate will view that as a threat to Republic authority. The Senate is welcome to their opinion, but I've seen what happens when governments talk while people die. The ocean doesn't have time for bureaucracy, Master Jedi. It needs action." A Republic transport settled onto the beach, its ramp lowering to reveal Senator Tills and a delegation of Mon Calamari officials. They'd traveled here immediately upon hearing about Arthur's intervention, recognizing that the political landscape had just shifted dramatically. A being who could defeat Nihil raiding parties single-handedly, who commanded entire ocean ecosystems, who operated outside Republic authority, but in defense of Republic worlds. He was either the best ally or the worst enemy the Senate could imagine. "King Curry," Tills called out, her voice carrying over the sound of waves. "We need to discuss what happens next." Arthur looked at Stellan, then at the Senator, then out at the ocean where rescued swimmers were being treated by Republic medical personnel. He thought about Earth, about Atlantis, about the responsibilities of kingship and the price of protection. He thought about all those ocean worlds out there in the vast darkness, vulnerable and voiceless. "What happens next," Arthur said, "is that the galaxy's oceans get a voice, whether the Republic likes it or not." The Force rippled around them, not in response to Arthur's words, but to the fundamental shift in possibility they represented. Master Stellan felt it clearly, a new current entering the stream of galactic destiny, one that even the Jedi couldn't fully predict or control. The High Republic's golden age was about to become considerably more complex, and in the deepest parts of Castellan's oceans, in similar depths across 100 other water worlds, ancient things stirred. They'd felt the call, they'd recognized the king, and they were beginning to remember what it meant to have someone speak for the deep places where even the Force's light struggled to penetrate. The transformation of the ocean worlds began with whispers, rumors carried through hyperspace by Republic traders, Jedi reports filed with growing concern, and most effectively, through the marine life networks that now spanned star systems. Arthur Curry had spent 3 months traveling between waterworlds, and in his wake, he left something the galaxy had never seen before: unity. On Manon, he'd negotiated a historic peace between the surface-dwelling Selkath and the deep trench dwellers who'd been considered mythological until Arthur proved their existence by bringing their elders to the bargaining table. On Glee Anselm, he'd helped the Nautilans develop sustainable harvesting techniques that tripled their food production while actually increasing marine biodiversity. On Mon Cala, he'd finally resolved the Mon Calamari Quarren tensions by doing what centuries of Republic mediation couldn't. He'd asked the ocean itself what it wanted, and both species found it difficult to argue with the unified voice of their own ecosystem. But it was on Camino that everything changed. The storm-racked cloning world had always been isolated, its inhabitants focused entirely on their genetic research and the massive contracts that funded their operations. The Kaminoans were brilliant, arrogant, and utterly convinced of their superiority. They had been tolerating Republic presence only because it brought credits, not because they particularly cared about galactic politics. Arthur arrived during a tropical storm that would have grounded any normal spacecraft. He rode the Star Whale through waves that crested at 70 meters, his enhanced physiology reveling in the raw power of Camino's perpetual tempests. The Kaminoans watched from their stilted cities as this golden-haired stranger walked across their ocean's surface, not metaphorically but literally, the water solidifying beneath his feet with each step, responding to his will like a living extension of his body. Prime Minister Lama Su received him in a sterile chamber, high above the waves, the Kaminoan's elongated neck giving him an appropriately condescending angle to look down at his visitor. "We've heard the reports, King Curry. You've been making quite a reputation among the water worlds, but Camino has no need of your services. We are entirely self-sufficient." Arthur looked past the Prime Minister to the windows, where he could see the vast cloning facilities stretching across the ocean like metallic growths. His telepathy reached downward, past the stilts and support structures, into the depths where Camino's native life struggled to survive amid the pollution and disruption from the surface cities. "Your ocean is dying," Arthur said bluntly. "You've been dumping genetic waste and industrial byproducts into the deep trenches for decades. The native species, creatures you probably don't even know exist, are being poisoned. In another 10 years, this ecosystem will collapse completely." Lama Su's expression didn't change, but his long fingers twitched with irritation. "The ocean exists to serve Camino's purposes. If certain organisms cannot adapt, that is simply natural selection." "Natural selection?" Arthur's voice dropped to something dangerous. "You're deliberately destroying an entire biosphere because it's inconvenient. That's not selection, Prime Minister. That's genocide." Strong words from someone who's been in our galaxy for less than a season. Lama Su gestured toward the door with one elongated hand. "Camino's internal policies are not subject to outside interference. Not from the Republic, and certainly not from a self-proclaimed king with delusions of oceanic authority." Arthur had been preparing for this conversation since he'd felt Camino's ocean crying out from across the sector. The Kaminoans represented everything he'd fought against on Earth. The belief that intelligence granted the right to exploit, that technology placed you above natural law, that the voiceless deserved no consideration. "I'm going to give you one chance," Arthur said quietly. Clean up your waste, stop the dumping, implement sustainable practices. Do it voluntarily, and I'll help you develop methods that don't compromise your research. Refuse, and I'll shut down every facility that touches the ocean until you comply. Lama Su actually laughed, a cold, clinical sound devoid of humor. You threaten Camino? Our defenses are specifically designed to repel orbital assault. Our contracts with the Republic won't mean anything when your cloning tanks run dry because I've commanded every water molecule on this planet to avoid your facilities. Arthur's eyes blazed with golden light. You think your technology trumps nature? I am nature, Prime Minister, and nature is done being patient. The standoff lasted 3 seconds. Then Lama Su pressed a button on his desk, and combat droids emerged from wall panels. Their weapons trained on Arthur. Escort this individual off Camino. Use whatever force is necessary. Arthur sighed. He'd really hoped it wouldn't come to this. The droids opened fire simultaneously, precision shots designed to incapacitate without killing, the kind of calculated violence the Kaminoans excelled at. But Arthur was already moving, his Atlantean combat reflexes operating on a level that even droid programming couldn't track. He spun, using the trident to deflect blaster bolts back at their sources with surgical precision. 3 droids fell in the first exchange. The remaining security forces switched to lethal settings. Arthur responded by slamming the trident's base into the floor, sending a shockwave of hydrokinetic energy through the building's structure. Every water pipe in the facility burst simultaneously. Every sprinkler system activated, every cooling tank, every hydration station, every molecule of liquid in the entire complex responded to Arthur's will, erupting from containment and flooding through the sterile corridors. The droids short-circuited instantly. Lama Su barely had time to activate emergency shields before water filled his office, rising to chest height in seconds. Arthur stood calmly in the center of the artificial flood, completely dry despite being submerged to his waist, the water simply refusing to touch him without permission. Last chance, Arthur said. Reform your practices, or I demonstrate exactly what happens when you declare war on the ocean. Lama Su's composure finally cracked. You're insane. You'd destroy centuries of scientific advancement over microscopic organisms? No. Arthur's voice carried absolute certainty. I'd save an entire ecosystem from beings who think advancement justifies atrocity. The organisms aren't microscopic to me, Prime Minister. I hear them, every one, and they're begging for someone to make you stop. Before Lama Su could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. On holographic displays, emergency reports flooded in from across Camino's surface. Water was rising in every cloning facility simultaneously. Not flooding exactly. The water wasn't damaging equipment or drowning personnel. It was simply present, in the air, in sealed chambers, seeping through walls that should have been impermeable, and it wouldn't respond to any technological countermeasures. Arthur had made his point. He could drown Camino without destroying it, could make the ocean itself an enemy that no amount of engineering could defeat, could transform their greatest resource into their most implacable foe. 48 hours, Arthur said, releasing his hold on the water and letting it drain away through the facility's compromised systems. You have 48 hours to present me with a comprehensive environmental reform plan. If I don't like what I see, I'm cutting Camino off from its own oceans. Your choice. He turned and walked out, leaving Lama Su standing in ankle-deep water amid sparking droids and ruined equipment. The Kaminoan's hands shook, not with fear, but with rage at being dictated to by an outsider, but he was also intelligent enough to recognize an existential threat. Arthur Curry had just demonstrated the ability to cripple Kamino's entire infrastructure without firing a shot. The galaxy's ocean worlds had found their voice, and it spoke with absolute authority. News of the Kamino incident spread through Republic space like wildfire. Senator Tills convened an emergency session on Coruscant, with Jedi Council members in attendance via hologram. The debate raged for hours. Some senators praised Arthur's environmental advocacy, while others condemned his methods as tyrannical overreach. The Jedi remained characteristically neutral, acknowledging both his results and the concerning precedent of one individual wielding such power without oversight. Master Stellan Gios watched the proceedings from the Jedi Temple on Starlight Beacon, the Republic's newest space station positioned on the frontier. His Padawan Bell stood beside him, struggling to reconcile what they'd witnessed over the past months with Jedi teachings about balance and restraint. "He's not evil," Bell said quietly. "Everything he's done has been to protect ocean life, to stop exploitation and violence. But Master, the way he operates, it's so absolute. No negotiation, no compromise when he thinks he's right." "That's what concerns the Council," Stellan replied. "Not his intentions, but his certainty. The Force teaches us that absolute conviction leads to darkness, that even righteous causes can corrupt when pursued without humility." "But he's not Force-sensitive. Maybe those rules don't apply to him." Stellan smiled sadly. "The Force flows through all living things, Padawan. Just because King Curry doesn't access it consciously doesn't mean he's exempt from its lessons. Pride, arrogance, the belief that power justifies action, these are paths to darkness regardless of how that power manifests." Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent transmission from Republic intelligence. Master Stellan's expression darkened as he absorbed the information, then immediately activated his communicator. "King Curry, if you can hear this, respond immediately. We have a situation." Arthur's voice crackled through moments later, transmitted from somewhere in Manayan's depths. "I'm here, Master Jedi. What's wrong?" "The Nihil are moving, multiple fleets converging on 3 ocean worlds simultaneously: Castellon, Glee Anselm, and a remote frontier world called Aquaman. Intelligence suggests this is a coordinated assault, possibly in direct response to your interference with their operations." Silence, then. "How long until they arrive?" 3 hours for Castellon, 4 for Glee Anselm. Aquaman is remote enough that we're estimating 6 hours, maybe 7. Republic forces are mobilizing, but we're spread thin across the sector. The Jedi will do what we can, but King Curry, this is beyond anything the Nihil have attempted before. They're committing enough forces to actually conquer these worlds, not just raid them." Arthur's response was immediate. "They're trying to prove that I can't protect everyone, that my authority over ocean worlds is meaningless if I can't be in 3 places at once." "Can you?" Bell blurted out, then immediately looked embarrassed. But Arthur didn't sound offended. "No, Padawan, I can't. I'm powerful, but I'm not omnipresent. If the Nihil hit all 3 worlds simultaneously..." He paused, and Stellan could hear the strategic calculations happening in real time. Master Jedi, I need you to be honest with me. Which world can the Republic defend without my help? Stellan consulted his tactical displays. Castellan has the strongest planetary defenses and the largest Republic garrison. They'll suffer casualties, but they can hold until reinforcements arrive. Then I'm sending the Republic fleets to Glee Anselm and going to Aquaman myself. It's the most remote, which means it's the most vulnerable and the least likely to get Republic support in time. You'd trust us to defend Glee Anselm without you? Stellan couldn't keep the surprise from his voice. I'd trust you to try, which is more than I can say for most governments I've dealt with. Besides, Master Jedi, this is exactly what you wanted, isn't it? Me working with the Republic instead of operating independently. Consider this our first real collaboration. Before Stellan could respond, Arthur's tone shifted, became harder, more focused. But I need you to understand something. I'm going to Aquaman, and I'm going to stop the Nihil from taking that world, whatever it takes. If that means sinking their entire fleet, if that means turning the ocean into a weapon that makes your Jedi squeamish, I'm doing it. Those people are under my protection now. I won't let them fall. King Curry, I know what you're going to say. The Jedi code, balance, restraint, all of it. And in normal circumstances, I'd listen. But these aren't normal circumstances, and I'm not a Jedi. I'm a king. And kings protect their people with whatever means necessary. The transmission cut off. Stellan stood in the silence that followed, feeling the Force ripple with dark possibilities. Bell looked up at his master with concern. Should we be worried about him? We should be worried about what this conflict will reveal, Stellan said quietly. War has a way of exposing who people truly are, Padawan. King Curry has been playing the noble protector for 3 months. But when pushed to his limits, when forced to choose between his principles and his people's survival, we're about to learn what kind of king he really is. Aquaman existed in the kind of isolation that made even frontier worlds seem cosmopolitan. It had no strategic value, no rare resources, no political significance. What it had was water, pristine, abundant, and teeming with life that had evolved in almost complete isolation from the rest of the galaxy. A small colony of researchers and their families had established themselves there to study the unique ecosystem, living in harmony with the native aquatic species. The Nihil chose it precisely because it was defenseless. Arthur arrived 4 hours before the Nihil fleet, riding the Star Whale through hyperspace at speeds that should have been biologically impossible. He'd pushed the creature harder than ever before, and he could feel its exhaustion through their telepathic bond. But the whale understood urgency, understood that lives depended on their speed. The colony on Aquaman consisted of maybe 300 people spread across a dozen floating research platforms. They greeted Arthur with a mixture of confusion and relief. They'd heard the warnings, knew an attack was coming, but had no way to evacuate and no weapons to defend themselves. Arthur gathered them in the central platform's meeting hall, a structure that swayed gently with the ocean's rhythm. He stood before them, researchers, families, children who watched him with wide eyes, and felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders like a physical thing. I'm not going to lie to you, he said. The force that's coming wants to hurt you because you're vulnerable. They want to prove that no one can protect the ocean worlds, that isolation equals death. They're wrong. but stopping them is going to require me to do things that might frighten you." A Twi'lek researcher, her leku wrapped in practical coverings against the salt spray, spoke up. "What kind of things?" Arthur looked out at Aqualay's endless ocean, feeling the vast ecosystem pulsing beneath its surface. Creatures that had never known predators, coral formations that had grown undisturbed for millennia, an entire web of life that existed in perfect, fragile balance. "I'm going to turn this ocean into a weapon," he said quietly. "I'm going to use every creature, every current, every drop of water as a tool of war. Some of those creatures will die. The ecosystem will be traumatized, but it will survive. You will survive. And the Nihil will learn that ocean worlds are not easy prey." The colonists looked at each other with uncertainty. A human man, probably the settlement's leader, stepped forward. "The Republic said you were a protector. Is this protection?" "Using nature as a weapon, yes." Arthur met his gaze without flinching. "Because the alternative is letting you all die while I maintain some pure, unblemished moral high ground. I've been a king long enough to know that leadership means making choices others won't. If you survive this and decide you hate me for my methods, I can live with that. What I can't live with is standing by while innocents die because I was too afraid to use my power." The leader studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Then we trust you, King Curry. Do what you must." Arthur spent the next 3 hours in the ocean, deeper than any human technology on Aqualay could reach. He spread his consciousness across the entire planetary ecosystem, touching every mind, every creature, every living thing that called these waters home. And he explained what was coming. Most animals couldn't understand complex concepts like war or raiders, but they understood threat. They understood pack defense. They understood the Alpha's call to protect the territory. Arthur gave them purpose, direction, and most importantly, permission to fight back. When the Nihil fleet dropped out of hyperspace, they found Aquilay's ocean waiting for them. The Eye's lieutenant, a Dowitan named Kasav Miliko, commanded the assault fleet from his personal destroyer. He'd been promised easy pickings, a defenseless research colony, minimal resistance, and the chance to humiliate the self-proclaimed Ocean King who'd been disrupting Nihil operations for months. What he got instead was a nightmare. The first wave of landing craft descended toward the ocean platforms, expecting scattered blaster fire at worst. Instead, the ocean itself rose up to meet them. Waterspouts formed with impossible precision, reaching hundreds of meters into the air and snatching ships from the sky. Creatures that shouldn't have been able to survive outside the deep trenches breached the surface. Massive things with bioluminescent armor and tentacles that could crush starfighter hulls. And in the center of it all, standing on a pillar of water that held him 50 meters above the ocean surface, Arthur Curry raised the trident of Poseidon and declared war. The battle that followed would be recorded in Republic history as the Aqualay Defense, though later historians would debate whether defense accurately described what occurred. Arthur fought with the fury of someone who'd been pushed past his limit, who'd spent months restraining himself for the sake of diplomacy and cooperation. No more restraint, no more compromise. He summoned tidal waves that swallowed entire landing parties. He directed schools of predatory fish to attack Nihil fighters, their bodies clogging air intakes and smashing through cockpit transparasteel. He commanded the colony's research vessels to transform into ram ships, their hulls reinforced by water-solid barriers that let them punch through Nihil armor like it was paper. The trident blazed with golden fury, each strike sending bolts of oceanic energy that transformed metal into coral, that filled sealed compartments with crushing pressure, that made technology itself submit to nature's authority. Arthur was everywhere at once, coordinating attacks through his telepathic network, physically engaging enemy fighters, protecting colonists with barriers of living water. Kasav Miliko watched his fleet being systematically destroyed by one person and an ocean that obeyed his every command. The Dawutan had faced Jedi before, had learned to counter Force users through numbers and tactics. But this was something else entirely. This was nature itself rejecting their presence. He made the call to retreat when he'd lost 60% of his forces. The remaining Nihil ships burned hard for hyperspace, abandoning their landing parties and wounded to whatever mercy the Ocean King might show. Arthur let them run. He was too busy ensuring that the Nihil troops still alive in Aquilei's waters survived their surrender. He pulled them from the depths before they drowned, directed them toward the colony's detention facilities, and made sure the colonists understood these prisoners were to be treated humanely until Republic authorities arrived. As Aquilei's twin moons rose over the battlefield, Arthur stood on one of the research platforms surrounded by exhausted colonists and dying marine life. The victory had come at a cost. Hundreds of creatures had perished in the fighting, some from Nihil weapons, others from the strain of Arthur pushing them beyond their natural limits. The ecosystem would recover, but the trauma would linger for generations. The Twi'lek researcher who'd questioned him earlier approached slowly. "You saved us." "I did what I promised." Arthur looked down at the trident, its golden surface stained with ash and Nihil blood. Was it worth it? All those lives, the damage to your ocean. "We're alive to study and protect this ecosystem for decades to come," she said quietly. "The alternative was complete destruction. So yes, King Curry, it was worth it." Arthur nodded, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd crossed some invisible line. He'd won, yes, saved hundreds of lives, proven that ocean worlds could defend themselves with his help. But the sheer violence of it, the way he'd transformed a peaceful ecosystem into a killing field. Was this what kingship looked like in this galaxy? Constant warfare, using power without restraint, making impossible choices and living with the consequences. A Republic cruiser dropped out of hyperspace 3 hours later, bringing Jedi reinforcements and support personnel. Master Stellan Gios was among them, and one look at Arthur's expression told him everything he needed to know about how the battle had gone. "The Nihil retreated," Stellan said. "It wasn't a question. I broke them." Arthur's voice was hollow. "I didn't just defeat them, Master Jedi. I terrified them. They'll think twice before attacking ocean worlds again." "And Glee Anselm?" "Republic forces held. The Nautilans fought alongside your troops, and together they repelled the assault. Casualties, but manageable." Arthur finally looked at the Jedi. "You were right to question me. I've been operating without oversight, without accountability, convinced that my intentions justified any action. Today I proved that I can win battles, but I'm not sure I proved I should." Stellan sat down beside him, the ancient Jedi and the interdimensional king watching as medics tended to wounded colonists. and Republic engineers began assessing the damage to the platforms. "The Force teaches us that power without wisdom leads to suffering," Stellan said. "You have incredible power, King Curry, but wisdom comes from accepting that power has limits. Not just physical limits, but moral ones. The question isn't whether you can turn oceans into weapons. The question is whether you should, and when, and at what cost. I'm open to suggestions." Arthur's tone held genuine curiosity. "Work with us? Not as a subordinate or an employee, but as a partner. The Jedi Order has spent millennia learning to wield power responsibly. The Republic, for all its flaws, provides structures that prevent anyone being from accumulating too much authority. You don't have to surrender your sovereignty or stop protecting ocean worlds, but let us help you find balance." Arthur considered this. 3 months ago, he would have rejected it outright. But 3 months ago, he hadn't seen the look in those Nihil soldiers' eyes as they surrendered. Pure, absolute terror of what he might do to them. He hadn't felt an entire ecosystem groaning under the weight of being weaponized. He hadn't realized that being the most powerful being in the ocean didn't automatically make him right. "All right," he said finally. "Let's try partnership. But on equal terms, Master Jedi. I'm still a king. I won't kneel to the Republic or defer to the Jedi Council. I'll work with you, coordinate with you, even take your advice when it makes sense. But the ocean world's sovereignty remains non-negotiable." Stellan extended his hand. "Then let's formalize it. The ocean world's coalition, a sovereign entity in partnership with the Republic, with you as its protector and representative. The Senate won't love it, but they'll accept it after today's victories." Arthur gripped the Jedi's hand, sealing an agreement that would reshape the political landscape of the High Republic. As they shook, both men felt the Force ripple around them, not in warning this time, but in affirmation. This was the right path. Difficult, complicated, requiring constant negotiation and compromise, but right. In orbit above Aquaman, Republic technicians were already analyzing recordings of the battle, trying to understand exactly what had happened. The footage showed impossibilities, water moving with conscious purpose, creatures coordinating with military precision, an entire ocean becoming an extension of one being's will. The galaxy's ocean worlds had their king, and the king had learned, was still learning, what it meant to rule responsibly in a galaxy far more complex than he'd ever imagined. The Ocean Worlds Coalition was formalized 6 weeks after the Aquaman defense, in a ceremony held on Mon Cala that brought together representatives from 43 water planets across Republic space. Arthur Curry stood before the assembled delegates. Mon Calamari, Quarren, Nautolans, Selkath, Gungans, Kaminoans, and dozens of species he was still learning to identify, and accepted a responsibility that would have seemed impossible 4 months ago. He was no longer just a king from another dimension, lost and trying to find his way home. He was the deep king of the frontier, protector of the ocean worlds, and partner to the Galactic Republic in maintaining peace across the water realms that covered nearly 30% of inhabited space. Senator Mina Tills presented him with a formal charter, handwritten on traditional Mon Calamari water silk, that outlined the coalition's relationship with the Republic, sovereignty with cooperation, independence with mutual defense obligations, the right to self-governance balanced against the responsibility to uphold Republic law within coalition space. It was a delicate compromise that satisfied almost no one completely, which Arthur had learned meant it was probably the best solution available. Master Stellan Gios stood in the audience alongside Bel Zettifar and 3 other Jedi Council members who'd traveled from Coruscant specifically for this occasion. The Jedi had their own concerns about the Coalition. It represented a concentration of power outside their traditional influence, governed by someone whose abilities they still didn't fully understand. But Stellan had argued passionately that working with Arthur was infinitely preferable to opposing him, and the council had reluctantly agreed. As the ceremony concluded and delegates filed out to begin the celebration that would last well into Mon Cala's night, Arthur found himself standing on a balcony overlooking Coral City's bioluminescent streets. The trident rested against the railing beside him, its golden surface reflecting the city's multicolored lights. He'd grown attached to this weapon over the past months, relied on it in ways he'd never relied on anything back on Earth. It had become an extension of his will, a focus for his power that transformed raw ability into precision and control. Thinking about home? Stellan's voice came from behind him. Arthur didn't turn. Always. Earth, Atlantis, my people there. I wonder if they're looking for me, if they think I'm dead. My responsibilities don't just disappear because I got sucked through a dimensional portal. Have you found any way to return? I've been too busy building a coalition and fighting raiders to search properly. Arthur finally looked at the Jedi. But honestly, I'm not sure I want to go back. Not yet, anyway. Stellan raised an eyebrow. That's quite a change from the person who arrived on Mon Cala, demanding answers about how to get home. That person didn't know there were thousands of ocean worlds, with no one to speak for them. Didn't understand what it meant to have entire ecosystems crying out for protection. Arthur gestured toward the city below. On Earth, I fought constantly to make surface governments acknowledge ocean sovereignty, to get them to stop treating the seas as dumping grounds and resource deposits. Here I can actually change things, build something that lasts. And if you could go home tomorrow? The question hung in the salt-tinged air. Arthur considered it honestly, turning over the implications in his mind. Earth needed him, Atlantis needed its king, but this galaxy, these ocean worlds that had welcomed him and accepted his protection, they needed him too, maybe more. I don't know, he admitted. Ask me again after I've figured out whether this coalition can actually survive without me holding it together by force of will. Their conversation was interrupted by Bel Zettifar, who hurried onto the balcony with a datapad clutched in his hands. Master King Curry, Republic Intelligence just sent an urgent communique. The Nihil are moving again, but this time it's different. Arthur straightened. How different? They're not attacking ocean worlds. They're avoiding them entirely, rerouting their raids to land-based targets, adjusting their hyperspace routes to give Coalition space a wide berth. Bell looked up from the datapad with confusion. It's like they're afraid of you. They should be, Arthur said flatly. I made sure of that at Aquaman. But that's the problem, Stellan interjected, understanding dawning in his expression. Fear is a deterrent, but it's also a motivator. The Nihil aren't going to simply accept permanent exclusion from a third of Republic space. They'll adapt, find new strategies, possibly even seek allies who can counter your abilities. Let them try. Arthur's confidence was absolute. I command every ocean in Coalition space. What ally could possibly match that? Stellan's discomfort was palpable through the Force. King Curry, Arthur, hubris has destroyed greater beings than you or I. The moment you believe yourself invincible is the moment you become vulnerable. Arthur wanted to argue, to point out that he'd faced every challenge this galaxy had thrown at him and emerged victorious. But something in Stellan's expression, a genuine concern that transcended political maneuvering or philosophical differences, made him pause. The Jedi had become something approaching a friend over these months, one of the few beings in this galaxy who seemed to care about Arthur's well-being rather than just his usefulness. "What are you seeing that I'm missing?" Arthur asked. Before Stellan could answer, the ocean itself screamed. Arthur's telepathic senses exploded with pain, not his own, but reflected from thousands of marine creatures across Mon Cala's waters. Something was wrong, fundamentally and catastrophically wrong. He gripped the balcony railing, his knuckles white with strain as he tried to process the flood of panicked thoughts bombarding his consciousness. "Arthur!" Bell caught him as he staggered, the young Jedi's hands surprisingly strong for his size. "The ocean!" Arthur gasped, fighting to separate his own mind from the collective terror washing over him. Something's in the ocean, something that shouldn't be there. Stellan was already moving, his comlink out and calling for Republic forces to scramble, but Arthur barely heard him. He was diving into the telepathic network, following the source of the disturbance downward through Mon Cala's depths, past the city's foundations, past the continental shelf, into the abyssal trenches where even Mon Calamari rarely ventured. There, a presence that made his Atlantean blood run cold, old, hungry, aware, and completely immune to his commands. Arthur's eyes snapped open, golden light blazing in their depths. "We need to evacuate the deepwater districts now. Something's coming up from the trenches and I can't control it." "Can't control it?" Stellan's calm fractured slightly. "You command all ocean life. How can something be immune?" "I don't know." Arthur was already running toward the edge of the balcony. "But whatever it is, it doesn't recognize my authority. It's not responding to telepathy. It's not even acknowledging that I'm trying to communicate. It's just rising." He dove off the balcony without waiting for a response, transforming the fall into a perfect entry that sent him plunging through Mon Cala's warm surface waters. Around him, the city's marine life scattered in panic, fish fleeing in massive schools, coral polyps contracting into defensive postures, even the domesticated riding beasts breaking their training and bolting for shallower water. Arthur swam deeper, faster than any Mon Calamari could match, his enhanced physiology allowing him to reach crushing depths in minutes rather than hours. The trident blazed with golden light, illuminating the darkness as he descended past 2 kilometers, then 3, then 5. The pressure here would flatten most beings into paste, but to him it felt like coming home. Atlantis existed at similar depths, and his body was built for this environment. At 7 kilometers down, he found the source of the disturbance. It was massive, easily the size of a Republic cruiser, with a body that seemed to shift between solid and liquid as it moved. Tentacles that glowed with bioluminescent patterns trailed behind it like living ribbons, each one thick enough to crush a building. But what truly terrified Arthur was its eyes. Dozens of them scattered across its amorphous body, each one intelligent and ancient and utterly alien. He'd encountered creatures like this before in Earth's deepest trenches, things that predated human evolution, that existed in such extreme isolation that they developed along completely separate evolutionary paths. But those had still been Earth creatures, still part of the planetary ecosystem he'd been born to command. This was something else, something that belonged to Mon Cala's unique evolutionary history that had spent millions of years adapting to conditions Arthur's telepathy had never encountered. "Stop," he commanded, pushing his consciousness toward the creature with all his considerable will. "I am the ocean's voice. I speak for all marine life. Acknowledge me." The creature's response was immediate and crushing. It didn't attack Arthur physically. Instead, it attacked his telepathic connection. The mental feedback was like having his brain electrocuted from the inside. Arthur screamed, releasing a stream of bubbles as he lost control of his breathing for a moment. The creature's consciousness was vast, distributed across its entire body rather than centralized in a brain. It thought with every cell, processed information through chemical reactions Arthur's mammalian mind couldn't comprehend. And it was hungry, not for food in any traditional sense, but for the surface, for the light, for the warmth of shallow waters it had been denied for countless millennia by the pressure differential that kept it trapped in the abyss. Arthur's arrival, his telepathic commands spreading through Mon Cala's ocean over the past months, had inadvertently awakened it. The creature had felt his power touching every other living thing in its world and decided to investigate, to see if this new presence could help it reach the surface it had been dreaming of for ages beyond counting. Arthur understood all this in a flash of involuntary telepathic contact. The creature wasn't malicious, it was desperate. And its ascent toward the surface would destroy Coral City as surely as any Nihil attack, not through malice, but simply through its immense size and the displacement of water that would accompany its rise. He had seconds to make a decision. Fight the creature and risk killing something that was simply trying to survive? Let it rise and condemn thousands of Mon Calamari and Quarren to death by drowning. Try to communicate in ways his standard telepathy couldn't achieve. The trident pulsed in his grip, its ancient magic resonating with something in the creature's biology. Of course, the weapon was forged in Earth's primordial oceans, created when similar creatures swam Earth's seas. It spoke a language older than thought, deeper than instinct. Arthur raised the trident and channeled everything he had into it, not commands but understanding. He showed the creature what the surface was really like. The crushing gravity of air, the searing radiation of direct sunlight, the desiccation that would kill its water-dependent tissues within hours. He showed it that the dream it had clung to for millions of years was based on ancient genetic memory from when its ancestors could survive in shallow water before evolution specialized it for the abyss. The surface wasn't freedom, it was death. The creature's ascent slowed. Its tentacles contracted uncertainly. Arthur felt its consciousness processing the information, comparing the beautiful lie it had believed against the harsh truth he was offering. Then, with a psychic sigh that rippled through the entire ocean, the creature began to descend. It understood now. The abyss was its home, its prison, and its kingdom both. The surface was unattainable, not because of pressure or predators, but because evolution itself had locked it into a specialized niche it could never escape. Arthur swam alongside it as it retreated into darkness, maintaining the telepathic link that was no longer hostile but melancholy. "I'm sorry," he projected, the thought colored with genuine grief. "I'm sorry I woke you. I'm sorry the surface isn't what you hoped. I'm sorry evolution is cruel." The creature's response was wordless but clear. Gratitude. Someone had finally understood. Someone had acknowledged its ancient loneliness, its impossible yearning. That was more than it had expected from the universe. As it settled back into the trench where it had slumbered for untold ages, Arthur felt it projecting one final thought, not in words, but in the language of deep-sea chemical signals that the trident translated for him. Protect them, the shallow swimmers. They don't understand how fragile their world is, how quickly it could become as lonely as mine. Arthur surfaced in Coral City's harbor an hour later to find Republic forces on full alert, evacuation procedures halfway initiated, and Master Stellan coordinating with Mon Calamari defense forces from a command platform. The Jedi's relief when Arthur emerged was palpable. "What happened down there?" Stellan demanded. "We detected massive seismic disturbances, then they just stopped." "I encountered something I couldn't control," Arthur said, exhaustion evident in every word. "An ancient creature that predates modern ocean ecosystems. It was drawn by my telepathic activity, wanted to reach the surface. I convinced it that wasn't possible, that its place was in the deep trenches." "Convinced it?" Bell looked amazed. "You talked down a monster." "It wasn't a monster, it was just lonely." Arthur pulled himself onto the platform, water streaming from his armor. "And it taught me something important. I've been operating under the assumption that commanding ocean life means I understand it. But there are creatures in this galaxy's oceans that evolved under completely different conditions than anything on Earth. My telepathy works on them, but not always the way I expect. I need to be more careful, more respectful of what I don't know." Stellan nodded slowly. "Wisdom hard-earned. The Force teaches us that true mastery comes from acknowledging how much we don't understand. Perhaps you're finally ready to hear that lesson." "Perhaps." Arthur looked back at the ocean, at the dark waters that concealed depths he'd barely begun to explore. "I've spent 4 months building this coalition, claiming authority over ocean worlds I've never visited, speaking for creatures I've only just met. What if I'm wrong? What if there are things down there that don't want or need a king?" "Then you adapt," Stellan said simply. "Leadership isn't about being infallible, King Curry. It's about learning from mistakes and doing better next time. The creature you encountered tonight, did you destroy it?" "No, I helped it. Even though it threatened the city, even though fighting it might have been easier." "Yes." Stellan smiled. "Then you're already better than many leaders I've known. The easy path is usually the wrong one." The celebration of the coalition's founding resumed after the all-clear was given, though with a more subdued tone. Arthur participated long enough to reassure the delegates that the crisis had passed, then retreated to the private chambers Senator Tills had provided for his use during coalition business on Mon Cala. He stood alone in a room designed for aquatic comfort, partially flooded with currents carefully controlled to create a soothing environment. The trident rested in its stand, still glowing faintly with residual power. Arthur studied his reflection in the water, seeing a face that had aged more in 4 months than in the previous 4 years. Responsibility did that. Power did that. Being suddenly thrust into a position where millions of lives depended on your decisions, where every action had consequences you couldn't fully predict. He thought about Earth, about Atlantis and Mera and the Justice League and all the responsibilities he'd left behind. He'd been so focused on survival when he first arrived, then so consumed with building the coalition that he'd barely had time to grieve for what he'd lost. But was it really lost? Or had he simply found a different ocean to protect, a different throne to occupy, a different purpose to serve? A soft chime at the door interrupted his brooding. Arthur called permission to enter, and to his surprise, it was the Kaminoan Prime Minister, Lama Su. The tall, pale figure stood in the doorway, with an expression Arthur had learned to interpret as deeply uncomfortable. King Curry, I apologize for the intrusion at this late hour. Prime Minister. Arthur kept his voice neutral. The Kaminoans had submitted their environmental reform plan as demanded, and Arthur had grudgingly approved it after ensuring it actually addressed the ecological damage. But the relationship remained tense. What can I do for you? Lama Su entered the chamber with careful, measured steps. I came to inform you that Kamino's ocean biodiversity is increased by 18% since we implemented your recommended protocols. Several species we believed extinct have begun to repopulate. The efficiency of our cloning operations has actually improved with the cleaner water systems. Arthur waited. There was more coming. I also came to acknowledge that you were correct. The words seemed physically painful for the Kaminoan. Our practices were unsustainable. We were so focused on genetic perfection that we failed to see we were destroying the very environment that made our work possible. You forced us to face that reality, and while I resented your methods, I cannot argue with the results. Is this an apology, Prime Minister? This is a Kaminoan accepting observable fact. Lama Su's long fingers twitched. But if you require an apology for my initial hostility, then yes, I apologize. You are not the tyrant I accused you of being. You are simply someone who understands that some things are worth fighting for, regardless of political convenience. Arthur studied the Kaminoan for a long moment, then gestured to a seat. Would you like to stay? I find I could use the company. And it seems we both have things to reconsider about our initial judgments. Lama Su remained standing. Kaminoan physiology made sitting uncomfortable, but moved closer to the conversation area. I have been reviewing records of your Earth, the reports the Jedi compiled from your initial testimony. Your Atlantis faced similar challenges to Kamino, an advanced civilization attempting to coexist with surface dwellers who neither understood nor respected ocean sovereignty. We still face those challenges. My being here doesn't change that. Have you considered that perhaps you were meant to be here? Lama Su's question was surprisingly philosophical, that your arrival was not random chance, but some form of cosmic necessity. The ocean worlds needed a voice, a protector who understood their unique requirements, and you appeared exactly when the frontier expansion was making such protection critical. I don't believe in destiny, Prime Minister. I believe in responsibility. Whether I was meant to be here or not doesn't matter. I am here, and these worlds need help, so I help. A practical philosophy, very non-Jedi. Arthur laughed despite himself. The Jedi and I are still figuring each other out. They want balance and contemplation. I want action and results. Somehow we're making it work. They talked for another hour about ocean ecosystems and cloning ethics and the challenges of leadership when you wielded power others couldn't comprehend. It was the first genuine conversation Arthur had shared with someone who wasn't trying to recruit him, study him, or use him for political advantage. Just two leaders discussing the weight of their responsibilities. When Lama Su finally departed, Arthur felt something he hadn't experienced since arriving in this galaxy: peace. Not the absence of conflict, but the presence of purpose. He was building something here, something that mattered. The Ocean Worlds Coalition wasn't just a political entity. It was a promise that the voiceless would be heard, that ecosystems mattered as much as economies, that protection was more important than profit. Days turned to weeks, and the coalition solidified its position in Republic space. Arthur traveled constantly, visiting ocean worlds across the frontier and establishing telepathic networks that connected their ecosystems to his awareness. He learned to distinguish between the chemical communications of Glee Anselm's coral reefs and the electromagnetic pulses used by Castellan's deep-sea predators. He mediated disputes between surface and deep-dwelling populations. He coordinated with Republic forces to establish protected zones where marine life could flourish without industrial interference. The Nihil continued to avoid coalition space, their fear of Arthur's power proving an effective deterrent. But Stellan's warning proved prescient. Fear was not a permanent solution. Republic intelligence reported increased Nihil activity in adjacent sectors, new alliances forming between the Raiders and other criminal organizations, whispers of technology being developed specifically to counter hydrokinetic abilities. Arthur knew the peace couldn't last, knew that eventually he'd face a threat his power alone couldn't defeat. But for now, the ocean worlds were safer than they'd been in generations, and that was enough. 6 months after his arrival in the Star Wars galaxy, Arthur Curry stood on a floating platform in neutral space between Mon Cala and Camino, watching as representatives from 73 ocean worlds signed the Coalition's expanded charter. The document was more than just political agreement. It was a declaration that water worlds would no longer be treated as resource deposits or afterthoughts in galactic politics. They had sovereignty. They had a voice. They had a king who spoke for the deep places where the Force itself struggled to reach. Master Stellan stood beside him, now a permanent Jedi liaison to the Coalition. Bell had been assigned as his Padawan assistant, the young Jedi's enthusiasm for ocean ecosystems proving unexpectedly useful. Together, they'd created something unprecedented, a partnership between Force users and someone whose power derived from completely different sources, working toward common goals despite fundamental philosophical differences. "You know, this is just the beginning," Stellan said quietly as the ceremony concluded. "The Coalition is established, yes, but maintaining it, protecting it from those who see it as a threat, balancing its needs against Republic interests, that will be the real challenge." "I know." Arthur watched as delegates celebrated, species that had been rivals for millennia, now united under a common banner. "But I've never backed down from a challenge, Master Jedi." Ask anyone from Atlantis, persistence is my defining trait, along with a certain stubborn refusal to accept limitations. That, too. They stood in companionable silence as Mon Cala's twin suns set behind the distant planet, painting the ocean platform in shades of gold and crimson. In the waters below, marine life from dozens of worlds swam together in patterns Arthur had orchestrated, a living symbol of the unity the coalition represented. Somewhere in the depths of those gathered waters, the ancient creature from Mon Cala's trenches dreamed its lonely dreams, content now that someone understood its isolation. Somewhere in the outer rim, Nihil marauders plotted their return, developing weapons and strategies to counter the Ocean King's power. Somewhere on Earth, in a dimension Arthur could no longer reach, Atlantis mourned its missing king and wondered if he would ever return. But here, now, in this moment of triumph and potential, Arthur Curry felt something he hadn't experienced since the portal had torn him from his home: belonging. He wasn't just a lost dimensional traveler anymore. He was the deep king of the Republic, protector of ocean worlds, voice of the voiceless. And his reign had only just begun. The Force rippled around them, not in warning or prophecy, but in simple acknowledgement. A new thread had been woven into the galaxy's destiny, one that even the Jedi couldn't fully predict or control. The ocean worlds had found their champion, and the galaxy would never be quite the same. Master Stellan felt it clearly. Arthur Curry would shape the High Republic's future in ways no one could anticipate. Whether that influence proved salvation or catastrophe remained to be seen, but one thing was certain: the days when ocean worlds could be ignored or exploited were over. The deep had risen, and it demanded respect. As the celebration continued into Mon Cala's night, Arthur made a silent promise to himself and to every creature swimming in the galaxy's countless oceans. He would protect them, he would speak for them, he would ensure that no government, no corporation, no enemy could threaten them without facing his wrath. He was a king, and kings protected their people, no matter how many light years separated him from the throne he'd been born to occupy. The Ocean Worlds Coalition stood as testament to that promise, and Arthur Curry would spend however long it took to find his way home, making sure that promise was kept. Conclusion: the Ocean Worlds Coalition transformed the political landscape of the High Republic in ways even the Jedi Council hadn't anticipated. Within a year of its founding, Coalition space became the most ecologically stable region in Republic territory, with marine biodiversity increasing across every member world. Arthur's telepathic networks created early warning systems that detected everything from environmental degradation to approaching threats, giving ocean worlds unprecedented security. But the galaxy's criminal elements adapted. The Nihil, after their defeats at Aquila and elsewhere, began developing sonic disruptors specifically designed to disrupt Arthur's telepathic connections. Rumors spread of ancient Sith artifacts that could sever the bond between a telepath and their subjects. And in the unknown regions, something older than the Republic itself stirred. Ancient creatures that predated modern ocean life, beings that might prove immune to Arthur's commands, just as the Mon Cala trench dweller had been. Arthur knew these threats were coming, knew his power, impressive as it was, had limits that would eventually be tested. But he'd learned something during his months in this galaxy. He didn't have to face every challenge alone. The Jedi Order, the Republic, the Coalition's member worlds, they were allies, partners in a shared mission to protect life and maintain peace. Whether Arthur Curry would ever find his way back to Earth remained uncertain. The dimensional rift that brought him here had left no trace, no pathway to follow home. But perhaps that was fate's way of telling him his work in this galaxy wasn't finished. The ocean worlds still needed him. The Coalition still required his guidance, and somewhere in the vast depths between stars, countless creatures still cried out for someone who understood their language. So the Deep King remained, ruling not from a throne but from the endless oceans of 100 worlds, speaking for those who had no voice, protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. He'd been torn from one kingdom and given responsibility for thousands more. It was a trade he hadn't chosen, but one he'd learned to embrace. And if the Force had its way, as it always seemed to, Arthur Curry's greatest challenges were still ahead. New threats would emerge, new alliances would form, and the question of whether a being with his power could truly maintain balance while wielding authority would be tested again and again. But for now, the oceans of the High Republic had their champion, and that would have to be enough. May the Force be with you. More stories await.